A movie that demonstrates an example of how violence can be excusable and justifiable would be Boy Wonder. This movie shows the story of a teenage boy named Sean who seems very shy. He comes off this way because he was traumatized as a boy when he witnessed his mother being murdered by a man who was trying to hijack their family car. Throughout the movie, it shows the pain and suffering Sean lived through as a child and how it transformed him into seeking revenge for his mother's death, since the killer was never found and he thinks the law is failing him and his mother. Whenever Sean encounters someone being abusive towards another individual, he cannot help but act out in violence towards the abusive party. This fictional movie shows an example of crime as a social control, also known as self-help justice. Self-help or social control can be described as an expression of grievance by use of violence or property destruction. It is taking the law into your own hand when the law has failed you or someone else. I've attached the movie trailer for you all to watch and get a better understanding. A book that demonstrates an example of how violence can be excusable or justifiable would be Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The section specifically would be during the dueling club in Chapter 11. Throughout the whole book, or even in most of the series, Harry has not exactly gotten along with one of the characters known as Draco Malfoy. Malfoy has repeatedly talked down on Harry and bullied him. In the dueling club, the students of Hogwarts were practicing how to disarm each other when Harry and Malfoy got paired up to go first. On the count of three, the two of them were supposed to cast a disarming spell on each other, but when Lockhart, the instructor, got to the number two, Draco cast a spell that flew Harry across the room, causing Draco to laugh. In return, Harry commands a spell in which sends Draco flying across the room as well. This is a form of self-defense. There were clear instructions to only disarm each other, but Draco failed to listen and decided to cause harm to Harry instead. This can also be an example to insinuate the term ego depletion. Ego depletion is what is referred to when we talk about an individual's self-control being a mental muscle. Self-control is weakened by stress, especially when it's repetitive, like Malfoy's bullying throughout the season towards Harry. A song that demonstrates an example of how violence can be excusable or justifiable would be Gunpowder and Lead by Miranda Lambert. The song talks about her going to load a shotgun and light a cigarette to wait for her husband to get home. It says phrases throughout the song like, if he wants to fight, well now he's got one, or he slapped my face and shook me like a rag dog, or his fist is big but my gun is bigger. Since there's obvious history of physical abuse throughout the song, it is clear she's fearful enough to bring a firearm into a situation. This is an example of violence being excusable for reasons of diminished capacity. Diminished capacity focuses on how the living conditions this client experienced from physical abuse and fear made the client, or in this case Miranda Lambert, portray a mental state that would not make them responsible for their actions. The link provided takes you to a YouTube video where you're able to listen to the song as well. For my fourth choice, I chose to do a television series that demonstrates an example of how violence can be excusable or justifiable. I decided on Criminal Minds. One particular episode comes to mind when talking about excusable violence, and that would be Season 3, Episode 18, The Crossing. During this episode, a woman shot her husband dead when he was asleep in bed. After she killed her husband, she cleaned up the mess with all the blood and called the police to tell them what she had done. She admitted it right from the start that she had committed murder, but also it was known that she felt like she had no other choice. There is enough evidence to see that the husband had isolated the wife from having any kind of interaction with anyone other than the household and never left the property. When the cops asked her why she had cleaned up after she shot him, thinking it was to hide evidence, she claimed she had to because he would have been so mad to allow strangers into a messy house. It is clear she suffered from psychological abuse. This is another example that can be easily seen as violence being excusable for reasons of diminished capacity. After years and years of mental and psychological abuse received from her husband and both children, she had a mental state that would help make the case she was not responsible for her actions. The series and episode are available to watch on Netflix.